Okay, so welcome to our Workforce Wednesday webinar today. Today's topic is self-fulfilling prophecy, identifying, challenging, and changing. Okay, and today's February 15th. This is our Workforce Wednesday webinar series for our WIOA Professional Development. This session is brought on to you by the WIOA Professional Development Committee. So we appreciate you joining us this morning. Welcome and thank you. My name is Kirsten Bayer, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. And I will be your moderator, your facilitator, and your presenter for today. So lucky all of you, right? So again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. I am the Digital Communications Manager here at ICSPS. It is a full mouthful of an acronym. Here's my email. If you need to reach out to me after the session or following the session, please feel free to with any questions, comments, or concerns. I'm happy to address those for you. I see a lot of questions coming in the Q&A, so let me just address that person really quickly. Apologize for that. Okay, so again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. I'm the presenter today. I am the Digital Communications Manager for ICSPS. I also hold a bachelor and a master's degree in public relations and communications, specifically focusing on pedagogical practices, public speaking, and just being able to interpersonal and intrapersonal communication tactics. So today I'm going to be presenting and discussing the self-fulfilling prophecy and our self-talk and our self-esteem and our self-concept and just how those things interchange and work together to help motivate us and build us to be better employees and more passionate about our work and just more in tune with ourselves and how we can pour from a filled cup and not an empty cup. Coming out of the pandemic, we all were in the same storm, but we were not all in the same boat, right? So being able to fill our own cups is such an important tool. And so that's what we're going to kind of dive into today. I want to go over some housekeeping things before we get started this morning. So first and foremost, we are on the Zoom webinar platform. So you as an attendee do not have the ability to unmute or turn on your camera. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers. So I'm going to ask that you type any questions, comments, or questions into the chat, or you can utilize the Q&A function, and I will address those during the session, and we're going to pause a couple times, and then also towards the end of the session. So feel free to use both of those tools to you. Today's webinar recording and presentation will be on our website. Went ahead and put that in the chat here at the beginning, but I also will put it in the chat towards the end of the session too. And then tomorrow you'll receive a follow-up email that will have a survey that I'll put that survey link in the chat towards the end of the session. So that way, if you want to take it while the session's fresh in your mind, I know that's the only way that I'm going to take a survey, right? Is if I take it right away, I'm not going to remember to take it tomorrow. I won't make it a priority. So, but it will be in your follow-up email tomorrow as well, along with the URL link to where the recording and the presentation slides will be. Today's session is being recorded. It usually takes about 48 working hours to get the recording up and on our website and ready for you all to view. We also have closed captioning on today, so feel free to turn that on for accessibility reasons or even note-taking purposes. And then we're going to start off by the way we do every Workforce Wednesday webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and launch those beginning polls. If you're familiar with our series, we always want to know where your local area is at and then which partner you best represent. So those are up and live now. You can participate. So where is your local area? And then which partner do you best represent? So I am joining you from Central Illinois. Our center is at Illinois State University in Bloomington Normal. And I represent another WIOA partner. So ICSPS partners with DCO, OET, and we are a part of and help facilitate the WIOA Professional Development Committee. So I'm excited to bring you this content today on our Workforce Wednesday webinar. All right. So I got a couple people participating. So the poll should be up for you to participate in. Where's your local area? And then which partner do you best represent? That's the second poll. And you should be able to scroll down and answer those. A couple more seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll, share the results. We can debrief here really quickly. So it looks like most of you are joining us from Central Illinois. So welcome, my fellow Central Illinoisans, like I like to say. And then a couple of you are joining us from down south and up north as well. So thank you. We do appreciate your attendance. And then most of you are from Title I and Title III today, which is awesome. It's always nice to see Title III and Title IV partners on these webinars, and then other WEO partners and stakeholders as well. So thank you so much for spending your morning with me. I do appreciate it. And hopefully we can learn together this morning, right? So like I said, today we're going to be diving into our self-concept and this theory in communication that is the self-fulfilling prophecy theory. And so the first step is we're going to start at the beginning, right? And the first thing we're going to learn about today is perception. I think when I say the word perception, we all have a general understanding of what a perception is, but we're going to define it today. So perception is to attain awareness or notice sensory information to represent and understand the presented information or your environment. Okay. So as we perceive things in our life, it's our sensories or our senses, our smell, touch, vision, taste, our sensories and our senses way of understanding that information and environment that we're consuming. All perception involves signals that go through our nervous system, right? So that has to do with our senses. So there's 3 steps to the way that we perceive the world, we perceive others, and we perceive ourselves. Okay, so step 1 is we select. So our brain selects what we pay attention to. Okay, so there's constantly things, senses, and environment and situations, communication, things that are happening around us, right? There's a lot of ways to get distracted. So how does your brain decide what to perceive? The first step is it selects what to pay attention to, right? It selects to pay attention to the temperature, or it selects to pay attention to something that is in your line of vision. Okay. So what we pay attention to. Step number 2 is our brain organizes that information. So this is how we make sense of things. Okay. So our brain organizes what we're seeing or what we're feeling or what we're smelling or tasting, and then we interpret it. Okay. So if we're smelling, if our brain organizes the smell, we select to pay attention to our sense of smell. It organizes the smell, and then we interpret it to be we're smelling chocolate chip cookies. And it's that fast, right? Our brain works that fast. And so we interpret whatever our senses are paying attention to, and it explains the meaning of things that we are perceiving, that our senses are consuming, right? And so this includes other people, it includes ourselves, it includes the world around us, right? It's a very big picture, big concept term, perception is. But selecting, organizing, and interpreting the things that we perceive in ourselves can really affect our lives. And we're going to dive more into that today. So first, let's break it down. So when we select what we pay attention to, there's 4 different ways that your brain selects the information that you pay attention to. So you might have experienced some of these. You might have a tendency to see, hear, believe what you want to. Okay. This is called selective perception. So when we are selective about what we are selecting to perceive, it is called selective perception. And so we tend to see, hear, and believe what we want to. So if you've ever had a conversation with somebody, and then later on you're telling, or, maybe you're telling the story of that conversation, that person's there with you and they're like, no, that's not how it happened. It's because you are telling the story in the way that you perceived it. And so, raise your hand if that's ever happened to you, or your virtual hand. And so you tend to see, hear, and believe the things that you want to, right? So Sherry is raising her hand or their hand. So subjective selection is where we tend to select to pay attention to the things that we find important, right? So now we're not just selecting to perceive things that we believe or that we want to, right? Now we're doing it because we find that thing or that person important, right? So that colleague or that family member or that friend, we're choosing, our brain is selecting to pay attention to them because we subjectively find them important. Okay. Their relationship's important to us, or they're an important person, your boss or your supervisor or someone like that. And then confirmation bias is where our brain selects to pay attention to things that information that supports our own beliefs. Okay. So this is where we are seeking to select our environment and language and people that already support what we already believe. Okay. So you're probably the type of person who doesn't like to perceive things that go against the grain, go against your way of thinking. You don't like to have conversations with people who disagree with you or have differing opinions than you. You have a very confirmation way of perceiving the world, confirmation bias. So you're seeking to confirm your own biases, right? And you might be that person, or maybe you know someone who's like that. So feel free to raise your hand if you can relate to this. So maybe you select to only pay attention to media, right? The news stations or radio or sports teams that already confirm your own biases, your own way of thinking, right? And then the last one is selective retention. I appreciate all of you who are raising your hand. The last one is selective retention. So this is where go back one. Sorry. This is where you select to remember only the things that confirm your beliefs. So now we're not only selectively perceiving what we want to, we might be subjectively perceiving things that we find important or people that we find important. We are selecting to pay attention to things that confirm our own biases and our own beliefs. And then we're selecting to pay attention to things and remember information and the environment around us and people and things that people say and media and all these different messages that we're consuming. Now we are selecting to retain only the things that confirm our beliefs. So now we're not just selecting to only watch Fox News or only pay attention to a certain article or a certain person, right? Because we know that they think the way we think. Now we're choosing to only remember and retain those messages that are already confirming our own beliefs. So it's kind of taking that confirmation bias way of perceiving and selecting and taking it to that next step. So maybe you do this, maybe you find yourself doing this, right? And these are interchangeable throughout the day. You're not always going to be the type of person that only does when you perceive the world around you. You're not only selective perception in terms of perceiving. Sometimes you perceive things that you want to. Sometimes you perceive people and things that you find important, right? Sometimes you perceive information that confirms your own biases and your own beliefs. And then sometimes you select to only remember those things that confirm your own beliefs. So they're interchangeable. We do them throughout our lives, throughout our day, right? So select what we pay attention to. We can either select to pay attention to what we want to, select to pay attention to things that we find important or people we find important, select to pay attention to information and messages that confirm our beliefs, and then select to only remember those information and messages that confirm our beliefs, okay? And this has to do with people too. Okay, and then the next step is to organize our perception. So when we're perceiving, we select what we want to pay attention to, and then our brain organizes it. So how we make sense of the world, the people, the messages, the communication around us, okay? So our brain does this by grouping things together, or items or words or people or things that we're seeing or hearing, right? Sounds and objects, by grouping those together in proximity or similarity. So things that are either closer together or similar to each other. Okay. Our brain does this by organizing the items, the communication, the messages, the media that we're consuming, by paying attention to and organizing things that are in the forefront or the figure of our senses. So directly on your skin, right? You're feeling that directly. It's in the forefront or the figure of your touch, your sense of touch, or the forefront of your figure of your line of vision, or the forefront of or the figure of your hearing, because it's a sound that's really up close to your ear, right? Also what's in the background, right? So that's why when you're listening, you can hear things that are right in front of your ears, right? Right, really close to your ears. And then you can also hear like background noise, right? That's where the background noise comes from. It's our brain's ability to organize, perceive both noises, both the up close noises, the figure noises, and the ground noises, the background noises. So we organize by grouping. Our brains organize what we're perceiving by proximity or similarity, and then by what's in front or in the background of our senses, the figure in the ground. Then the last step is that our brain interprets it, right? And we do this so quickly, you don't even think about it. Okay. So our brain selects what we pay attention to, we organize it, and then we interpret what it means for the world around us, what it means to us, right? So our brain interprets and explains the meaning of whatever it is we're perceiving by either closure or context. So our brain interprets messages, communication, people, it interprets ourselves by a tendency to fill in information, to make sense of and draw conclusions from available data. Okay, so using our past experiences, past knowledge to be able to close the gaps, right? So that's why if you've ever taken a test before or read a passage or listened to somebody talk before, you are able to kind of fill in the missing gaps. If I know, for example, I had to take a test, I think whenever I was in high school, I'm not sure what it was, maybe for retention. But I remember taking a test where it was a passage that would have parts of the sentence missing, right? Or if you like when we were learning sentence structure, when you were younger, you would have words in the sentence missing, but your brain was able to fill in the missing word due to your brain's ability to perceive, organize, and then interpret in the closure manner, and then be able to explain the meaning of what you were reading or that sentence, right? So closing that gap. And then the context is when our brain tends to make sense of perceptions by examining the situation around them. So what's around whatever you're perceiving, or what are the other words, the other messages that you're consuming, and how can you fill in the gaps that way by using what's around you in your line of vision, or the other sounds that you're hearing, or the other things that you're feeling, your sense of touch, or the other tastes or smells that you're perceiving, and how can you use your other senses and the other messages and communication in the world and other people around to help close the gap on what the item is, or the person, or the message that you're trying to actually perceive. Okay. So we select what we pay attention to, we organize the message or the person or the communication or the media, and then we explain the meaning of it. And our brain does this so naturally that we don't even think about it, right? We perceive things, people, communication, media all the time. You're perceiving this webinar right now. So there are some factors that can affect our perception. The first one is physical. So for example, if someone is very tall or someone is very short, that affects how they perceive the world around them, right? If I walk into my house and I'm short, right? I'm 5'5". Well, that's probably medium height, but let's say I'm 5'1" and I'm short. If I walk into my house, I might look around my house and think, oh my gosh, my house is so clean. It's not dirty at all. I don't need to clean this weekend, right? But then my husband, who, let's say he's 7 foot tall, he's not, but let's say he's 7 foot tall. He sees dust on the shelves. He sees cobwebs on the ceiling, right? And he's like, oh my gosh, this house is so dirty. We need to clean. Okay, so that affects our physical height, affects our perception of whether or not the house is clean or dirty based off of our that physical factor. Okay. We also have experiential. So your past experiences affect how you perceive the world, right? And like I said before, a lot of us have weathered the same storm when it comes to the pandemic, but we weren't in the same boat. So we did not have the same experiences, and we don't have the same experiences in our day-to-day lives, even prior to the pandemic, post-pandemic. Everybody comes from different experiences, right? So your experiences affect the way you perceive the world. And then situational. So the time and the place also affects the way you perceive the world. Your 8 a.m. meeting, you might not perceive that and retain the information as well as your 1 o'clock meeting. Or maybe your 1 o'clock meeting, you don't retain that information as well because it's right after lunch, right? As your 9 a.m. meeting, because you were more alert and fresh. So the situation, the time, and the place affect your perception of information and people, right? If you meet a coworker out at a restaurant, the way you act is different than you might work or act in the office, in an office setting. So that place can also affect the way you perceive that interaction, that communication interaction with your coworker. So what does perception have to do with ourselves, right? So perception and our self-image is our perception of ourselves. Okay, so how we perceive ourselves. The way you describe yourself, it's a mental picture, generally that is resistant to change. So generally, it is hard to change your self-image. It's this idea that one has of one's abilities, appearance, and personality. So your self-image is this idea that you have of your ability as a human, your appearance, and your personality. That's what creates your self-image. And your self-image is typically resistant to change. It's hard to change our self-image. The difference between self-image and self-esteem is that our self-esteem is our confidence in our self-image, okay? So we have a self-image, we develop our self-image based off of the world that we perceive, based off of our situation, our physical being, and our experiences, right? That affects how we perceive the world. And we select and organize and interpret all of our experiences throughout our lives to develop this sense of a self-image. And then our self-esteem is our confidence in that self-image that we've developed over our lives. So William James is thought of as the creator of the self-esteem movement. So there's actually a self-esteem movement. And his formula is that self-esteem equals success divided by our pretenses. And when we define pretenses for this session, we're defining pretensions as goals, values, things we believe about our potential. Okay. So our goals, our values, and the things that we believe about our potential. So our self-esteem equals our success divided by our goals, values, and things we believe about our potential. And that's William James's formula for the self-esteem movement. Okay. And Weber in 2019 states that low self-esteem can affect everything in your life, from your relationships to your career. So that's why it's so important to understand how we perceive the world and our self-esteem and our self-image, and be able to define those things and understand how they affect each other in our lives as individuals, because we can't pour from an empty cup into our careers, right? And so low self-esteem can affect everything from your professional relationships to your personal relationships, to your career, to how successful you are, to your ability to reach your goals. Some common examples of low self-esteem might include feelings of anger or frustration about who you are as a person, being obsessed with being perfect, hating your body, feeling worthless, being an overly sensitive person, feeling anxious and fearful, constantly feeling angry, or trying to be a people pleaser. I know, completely being vulnerable to you all, strangers on the call, maybe some of you have met me in person. I am a people pleaser. I'm guilty as charged. I'm a people pleaser. I have a hard time saying no. I like to be able to say yes. And I will work until 2 a.m. if I have to, in order to be able to tell somebody yes, rather than tell them no. Even if telling them no wouldn't be that big of a deal, right? Even if the project could wait, even if it's, nobody's life is on the line, I still want to people please. And so that is an example of low self-esteem. So now we're finally getting to the meat and bones of this webinar. So the self-fulfilling prophecy is a person's expectation or internal beliefs that influence their behaviors and the way they interact with other people. Okay, so that's what it means to be self-fulfilling. The self-fulfilling prophecy is the tendency to live up to our own expectations and those that others have of us. So you have a tendency to want to strive to live up to your own expectations and expectations that others have of you, right? Makes sense. But this affects our self-esteem and our self-image. Our ability to meet those expectations that we have for ourselves and our ability to meet the expectations that others have of us affects our self-esteem and our self-image, right? And we know that negative self-image and negative self-esteem can affect our relationships and our careers negatively or positively. So we need to understand that we have a tendency to want to live up to do anything possible to strive to live up to our expectations that we put on ourselves and those that others put on us. And this can have both positive and negative aspects into our lives. So I want to do a quick poll. Time to wake you all up this morning if you're not already awake. I want to do a quick poll. Do you feel as an individual, let's do some self-reflection, right? Do you feel as an individual that you set realistic expectations for yourself? And then a follow-up, I'm going to launch a poll. Sherry, thank you for participating in the chat. I'm going to launch that poll right now. That way you can start participating. So yes, sometimes, or no. Do you feel you set realistic expectations for yourself? And then a follow-up question to that, do you feel you live up to the expectations you set for yourself? All of the time, most of the time, or none of the time? Do you feel you set realistic expectations for yourself? And do you feel you live up to those expectations? And then in the chat, I want you to reflect on when you do, most of you I see are answering the poll here. You're saying that yes, you do feel like you set realistic expectations for yourself, or sometimes you do, right? Maybe it depends on the situation. Do you feel like when you set those expectations for yourself and then you meet them, right? You live up to them? Because the second question, do you feel you live up to the expectations you set for yourself? Most of you said, one person said all of the time, high self-esteem, right? That's awesome for that one person. And then most of you said most of the time, right? Most of the time you live up to the expectations you set for yourself, right? So in the chat, I'm going to share those results of the poll here. I just went ahead and closed it. In the chat, I want you to self-reflect and think, How does that make you feel whenever you set those expectations for yourself and then you end up living up to them? Like you meet the expectation or you meet that goal that you set for yourself. Understand. Oops, sorry if you just heard my Apple Watch go off. I don't know if that's happened to anyone before. Donna said most of the time, but it's really about half the time. Okay, Donna, maybe you were the one who said you live up to your expectations all the time. Okay, so Darice, I apologize if I'm butchering your name, says that you feel accomplished. So when you set expectations for yourself and you meet those expectations, you feel accomplished. You feel more confident. Sherry says that they feel more confident and your self-esteem is good. Okay, let's get a couple more. Accomplished. Teresa says accomplished. Kathy says, when I do meet my goals or expectations, it feels great and motivating, right? Maureen says, I am mostly well pleased when I meet expectations and am ready to tackle another situation or issue. Sean says, I feel good about myself and want to do more. Amy says, it makes me feel confident and I made a good choice. Donna says, when I set expectations and when or if I do meet them, it does feel great. I feel accomplished. Stephanie says, I feel accomplished and relieved. Absolutely. Definitely relieved, right? When we set an expectation for ourselves, especially if it's a high expectation and then we rise to the challenge and we're able to meet it. Awesome. I feel accomplished and feel good about myself. Great. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that poll. And then we're going to go to the next slide. And this is another poll. So let me launch that one here. There we go. So it's up for you now. So the kind of the same question, but now not expectations you set for yourself, but expectations that others set for you. So do you feel others set realistic expectations for you? And do you feel that you live up to the expectations that others have of you? So we'll give everyone about a minute to answer that. Do you feel others set realistic expectations for you? And then do you feel you live up to the expectations that others have for you? This one's, some people are answering this a little more slowly. So maybe it's taking some more self-reflection to really think about if you feel like in general, other people set realistic expectations for you and that you live up to them. And, some of you might only be thinking about one person. Maybe this poll made you think about that one person who sets really unrealistic expectations for you and you're never able to meet them, right? And maybe this poll triggered that feeling a little bit. Jasmine says, other people's expectations generally are based on their perception of what I can and can't handle, which determines whether or not I live up to those expectations. Great self-reflection, Jasmine. Okay, so I'm going to end this poll. And so most of you said, do you feel others set realistic expectations for you? Some of you said yes, some of you said sometimes, and a couple of people even said no. So maybe you were thinking about one person or a group of people in particularly. Maybe you were thinking about your work life or your personal life. And then do you feel you live up to the expectations that others have for you? Most of you said most of the time, right? So if someone sets an expectation, most of the time you feel like you live up to it. Maybe you don't want to, right? But most of the time you do. Okay. So I'll share those results. And now I want you to participate in the chat and do some self-reflection and reflect on how does it make you feel as an individual whenever you don't, like somebody else sets expectations for you and you don't meet them. Okay. You do not meet those expectations. So your boss or a parent or a friend or a coworker sets an expectation for you and then you aren't able to live up to that expectation. How does that make you feel? Go ahead and participate in the chat. So I'll stop sharing the poll so that way it's not in your way as you're participating in the chat. Okay, so Kathy says crushed. She feels crushed when she's not able to meet others' expectations of her. Or them. Sorry, Kathy, I assumed your pronoun. And then Donna says, I can stress about that and I feel inadequate. So they stress about it and they feel inadequate. Sandy says that they feel like they should have tried harder. Sherry says, I'm trying to break a pattern of doing too much and feeling defensive if they still expect me to do something. Amy says, I feel like I disappointed them and I should try harder. Shalonda says, I feel overwhelmed and pressured. Gina says, I feel horrible. Teresa says, when I don't meet expectations, I feel that maybe I can try again. That's a good way to look at it, Teresa. Ashley says, horrible. I know I should be able to obtain the goal. Maureen says, it makes me want to evaluate the expectation of the other person or group and to re-examine my belief system as to whether or not I didn't meet them because the goal was set too high or I was not understanding the issue. Okay. Derice says, if I were not to meet the expectation, I'd feel awful, which is why I always try to counter and reset the expectation in advance. That's a great tip to do. So if somebody sets an expectation for you and you're worried that you won't meet it, maybe you try to counteract that expectation or reset the expectation in advance so that you are able to meet it. That's a great tip. Sean says that they feel pressure and they feel down and they feel guilty when they're not able to meet somebody else's expectations of them. I'm learning to speak up when expectations are expected of me that I know I can't achieve the goal, Stephanie says. That's great that you're able to advocate for yourself, Stephanie. Learning not to suffer in silence. I think we could all learn to not suffer in silence better, right? Great. Thank you all so much for participating in the chat and doing some self-reflection. I appreciate that. And we're not done. We're going to keep doing some self-reflection today. So we're going to move on to self-talk. So we've talked about perception, how we perceive the world, how our brain perceives ourselves and others, and how we select and we interpret and we organize or select, organize, and interpret those messages and those people in our world around us, right? And we've talked about how that perception affects our self-esteem and our self-confidence, right? So how we perceive ourselves, how that affects our day-to-day lives, and how negative self-esteem can negatively affect our relationships and our careers and our day-to-day, and positive self-esteem can also affect our relationships and careers and day-to-day, right? So let's talk about self-talk. So we've talked about self-esteem. We know what that is. We've talked about self-confidence. And now we're going to talk about self-talk. So self-talk is how you talk to yourself, right? We all have an inner dialogue all the time that's going on. So if we have negative self-talk, this can result in unnecessary stress, anxiety, depression, self-doubt, and a whole load of other negative things, right? And positive self-talk can encourage our own self-confidence. It's an effective coping mechanism, right? It can affect achievement. So a lot of you said you feel accomplished when you set expectations for yourself and you meet them. That's a form of positive self-talk, and a general feeling of well-being, right? So negative self-talk versus positive self-talk. And maybe you've practiced this before. Maybe you catch yourself doing this before. And so we all have an inner critic, right? I don't know why. I don't know the psychological or biological reasoning behind why we all love to just be so hard on ourselves and critique ourselves, but we all have an inner critic, right? We all have that inner dialogue and we are so hard on ourselves. So how do we silence that inner critic? Can we even silence that inner critic, right? You have to replace your negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And it's a challenge and it's hard and it takes practice and it takes consistency and it takes discipline to silence your inner critic. I would argue that you can't ever truly silence it. It's a day-to-day task. It's something that you always have to be cognizant of and aware of. But the only way to really silence it in your day-to-day is to be consistent with replacing those negative thoughts with positive ones. And then to practice forgiveness and challenge your negative self-beliefs. Okay. And having positive self-talk doesn't mean that you don't allow yourselves to feel the feelings, right? Feel the feelings, give yourself that 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour maybe that you need to feel the feelings. And then replace those negative thoughts with positive ones. Forgive yourself when you don't meet those expectations of yourself or when you don't meet the expectations of others. Forgive yourself and challenge yourself in the future. Right. And I think some of you are already doing that, right? Based off of how you participate in the chat. So we're going to do another reflection activity. And you can participate in the chat if you want to, if you feel that you want to be vulnerable, but absolutely do not feel like you have to. Maybe just self-reflect in your own mind. But ask yourselves, is my self-talk, the way that I talk to myself throughout the day, throughout a normal work day, okay? Today's a Wednesday, hump day, regular work day. Is the way that I talk to myself building me up or tearing me down? When you looked in the mirror this morning, did you build yourself up or did you tear yourself down? When you pass your reflection in your home office, in your window or in the workplace, in your buildings, when you pass your reflection, do you tear yourself down or do you talk yourself up? And is your way of thinking helping you or hindering you? Okay. Oh, Stephanie says talk up. So she talks herself up or they talk themselves up, which is awesome. Okay. So now we're going to do an activity. And Sean says they talk themselves up every morning, which is awesome. Super cool. You have great self-esteem. Maureen says a little bit of both. My daughter says I'm too hard on myself. Ashley says this morning I was talking down, but usually I feel confident in my day. Ashley, you know what? I love that you said that fluctuates and changes because that's so true. We have good days and we have bad days and we have high self-esteem days and low self-esteem days. And, if you have a day where something's just not going your way, like you might be really, really hard on yourself that day. There's things that we can do to help prepare for that better. Kathy says, I would love to say I talk myself up because that is what I tell my students they need to do, but I am my own worst enemy. Isn't that so funny how we're always willing to tell everybody else that they should be so confident in themselves and, oh, you're so great and you're so handsome or you're so pretty, you're so smart. We love to give compliments to other people, right? But we rarely give compliments to ourselves, right? Even me right now, I'm telling all of you like positive self-talk, yay, but I'm my own worst critic too, right? And so it's constant practice that we have to do. And so think of a recent time. This activity is another reflection activity. So you can participate in the chat if you want to. Absolutely do not feel like you have to. But think of a recent time when you were experiencing negative or unhelpful thoughts. Okay. So maybe it wasn't necessarily negative, but they were just unhelpful, right? You were frustrated at the situation or frustrated at the other person. Maybe it was this morning, right, Ashley, when you were talking down to yourself. Think of a recent time when you were experiencing negative or unhelpful thoughts. What was that situation? How did you feel and what did you do? Okay, so how did you feel in that situation and what did you do? I'm going to give you a minute to self-reflect. Some of you are typing in the chat, and I love that you feel that you can be vulnerable with me and with everybody else on this webinar. That's awesome. Okay. Sandy says, I always try to talk myself up when you think about everything you have accomplished. It's awesome to reflect on everything that you've done, how far you've come, right? Donna says, most people who know me say I am often too hard on myself and they feel I should have stronger self-esteem. I often feel I could do better. I am my own worst critic. I think we're all our own worst critics, Donna, if we're being honest. And it takes cognitive work. And I know the last thing we all want to do is have more things to think about and more work on our plate, right? You're all trying to juggle families and friends and your jobs and your clients and your students and the people that you're trying to help in the workforce system. And just some people, I feel like, walk through their lives and they're just trying to survive, right? And I have days where I feel like I'm just trying to survive this day. I'm just trying to get through this day, right? Those really busy days. And I feel like those really busy days where we're just trying to survive, or maybe you're having a bad day, nothing's going your way, that's when we tend to negative self-talk. Nathan says, when I'm thinking I'm not doing my job very good, when I'm doing all I can do. Stephanie says that they acknowledge their emotion, pause, and reframe it, and then they let it go. Awesome. That's kind of what we're going to do today, almost. Maureen says, sometimes an upbeat song is the best remedy, or simply count down and start moving. 1, 2, 3, go. Yep, sometimes that's all it takes. So as you're thinking of a recent time when you were experiencing negative or unhelpful thoughts, and you're reflecting on what that situation was, how did it make you feel? What did you do? Now we're going to use this step-by-step guide that's in the next coming slides to see if changing our thinking can bring us a better result in our future experiences with our negative self-talk or those unhelpful thoughts. So this step-by-step guide is a true, tried and true practice to help us develop more positive self-talk, just be more cognizant and aware of when we're doing this to ourselves. Catch it, control it, challenge it, change it, and cherish it. Okay, so the C, all the C's. So catch it, catch that negative thought or that unhelpful thought that you're having, whether it's about yourself or another person or your job. Maybe it's about your job. Maybe it's about a client. Maybe it's about a student that's frustrating you, or maybe it's your parent or your spouse or your child, right? So catch that thought, control it. Okay. You are the master of your mind. Control that thought. Stop when you find yourself thinking negatively. Say stop to yourself if you have to, maybe internally or quietly, and maybe you do it out loud. Who cares? Say stop to yourself to stop the downward spiral of thoughts leading you to sadness, guilt, anxiety, self-doubt, hurt, all of those things that you guys said that you felt about yourselves whenever you didn't meet your own expectations, right? You all felt those negative things. So catch it, control it, challenge it. Challenge what you are saying to yourself using the coming questions. So on the next slide is a bunch of challenge questions that you can ask yourself when you have these negative thoughts that we can challenge with ourselves, right? And then change it. Okay. So we're going to catch that thought, control it, challenge it, and change it. Change that negative thought you're saying to yourself to a more realistic or positive one to bring more pleasant and helpful emotions. And then cherish it. Cherish that you did that, right? Like give yourself a pat on the back, a round of applause. That takes work and that takes self-awareness. Okay. Not everybody has self-awareness in the world. It is a skill. I tell my students that, I tell my family that, I tell my coworkers that, right? I have, just to be personal about me, I have some family members that are not very self-aware, and it makes Christmases and arguments and, about the littlest things really fun to get through. So maybe some of you can relate to that. But cherish it. cherish that you did that, cherish that moment that you just created, that work that you did, that self-reflection that you just did, and move forward. So catch it, control it, challenge it, change it, cherish it. And we have some people being vulnerable in the chat, and I just want to say that I appreciate you feeling comfortable to do that today. So when you're challenging it, right? We have all the C's, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 C's. When you're challenging it, this third step, challenging that negative thought or those unhelpful thoughts, challenge your thoughts by maybe asking yourself these questions. Is this thought helpful that I'm having? What is a more healthy thought? What would I tell a friend in this situation? This is what usually works for me, to be honest with you, because I feel like I try to strive to be a really nice person, and I always try to notice other people. So if somebody changes their hair that day, or they ask a really compelling question in a meeting, I always try to acknowledge that to make them feel good, but I rarely ever do that to myself. So challenge your thought. What would you tell a friend in this situation that you're in, right? What evidence do you have that what you're thinking is really true? Sometimes we have really irrational negative thoughts, and it's almost like, let's test the reality of that actually happening. I teach an adjunct at class on the side, outside of ICSPS, and I adjunct at Richland Community College in Decatur, which is where I'm from. And I teach about communication apprehension, and we have tactics and tips about managing communication apprehension. And one of those is really to challenge, I'm blanking on the term now, but challenge your it's called reality testing. I should know this. I just taught it a couple of weeks ago. But reality testing. So testing the reality of that negative thought that you're having. Like, what is the reality that that's going to happen? You know, I have some students when I'm teaching about public speaking, that's the class that I teach, who have communication apprehension, and their biggest fear is that they're going to forget their whole speech, right? And we test the reality of that by saying, you know, you're not going to forget your whole speech. You have your note cards, you have a speaking outline. So there's absolutely zero chance that you would forget your whole speech because you're going to have your note cards with you, right? So challenging the reality of that situation, that negative thought. What's the reality that that's actually going to happen to you? What's the reality that other people think that about you, right? What, or is there any other reason this situation could have occurred? Is there another way of looking at this situation? What are some other viewpoints? What are some other viewpoints? It's kind of that practice, that cognitive practice of walking in somebody else's shoes. Like, what are some other viewpoints that other people have of you, or other ways of looking at things, right? I went to a conference yesterday with some of my coworkers on ISU's campus, and it was an EDI conference, so equity, diversity, and inclusion. And there was a mental health session, and one of the panelists was talking about being on the dance floor and being in the balcony. And I think too many times we're so busy with the dance floor of our lives that we forget to look from the balcony, right? That bird's eye view. So what are some other points of view or viewpoints? What is the worst, best, most likely outcome? And if the worst did happen, how would you handle that? If the worst scenario happened to you, or if the worst situation happened to you, how would you cope with that? How would you live through that? And can you do anything about this situation right now? I think that is the thing, number one challenging thought that I struggle with. Okay. I need to ask myself that more. I'm doing some own self-reflection with you all today. Can I do anything about this right now? this situation or this person that's causing me frustration, can I do anything to change them right now? Can I do anything to help them right this second? Most likely, sometimes the answer is no for me, and I struggle with letting that go. And I feel that affect my self-esteem because I want to be able to help them right away. And sometimes that's just not possible. So can I do anything about this right now? If you can, yes. If yes, take the appropriate action. If no, then accept it and move on, right? Help them later. Help yourself later. Help that person or that situation later. So after learning about the 6 C's, right? Thank you, Maureen, for loving my 6 C's. We love letters that start with, or words that start with the same letter. What is one thing that you're willing to start doing that can help you better manage your negative thinking? Okay, I want you to participate in the chat. So what is one thing from this session or just from, the 6 C's that you're willing to start doing that can help you better manage your negative thinking? And I'll go back to the 6 C's. So what is one thing from this session or one of the 6 C's that you're willing to challenge yourself to start doing following this session to manage your negative self-talk? I'm going to let you guys reflect on that for a minute. So Maureen says that they're going to challenge themselves to catch it early. Yeah, catch those negative thoughts early. The earlier, the better. Once you start that downward spiral, it is so much harder to climb out of it. Oh, that's very true. I like that. Not just catching it, but catching it early. I like that. Control it. Yeah. Controlling our negative thoughts is such a challenge. And sometimes I think we feel like we can't control them because our emotions, right? And sometimes I want to almost say that it's okay to feel the emotions, right? But we can still control the thoughts. Change it. What is the alternative to what I'm thinking or even saying? Yeah. Cherish it. I tend to critique the moment rather than cherish it. Yes, I love that. Acknowledge. Gina says, acknowledge my negative thinking and challenge myself to change it. Love that. Challenging those negative thoughts is important, and I would like to do more of that in the future. Great, Christine. I'm so happy you left with that. Control it by telling myself that I'm not helping the situation. I'm making it worse. Yeah. And ask myself if it's worth it to my health. I love that, Sherry, because I think sometimes we feel like, especially in our line of work, like whether you're from Title 1, 2, 3, or 4, all of our work is so interconnected, right? We are trying to change people's lives. We're trying to make a positive impact on others. Whatever you do, whatever title you're in, your goal, that's your big overarching, balcony view, not the dance floor view, balcony view, that's your goal. And it, sometimes it feels like things are on fire. That's what we like to say at ICSPS. This is on fire right now. This takes priority over everything else, right? And it's not really on fire. And I think that really affects my mental health. It really affects others' mental health. I know it's really not on fire. And it's okay to ask yourself, is this really worth it to your mental health? Right? Amy says, challenging negative thoughts and switching the thought to be the best you can, and you will succeed. I love that, Amy. Great. Thank you all so much for participating. Okay, so we were just on this one. So what is that one thing you're willing to start doing that can help you better manage that negative thinking? So a lot of you are willing to, I challenge all of you to leave this webinar and actually try to do those things and like be aware of it and be cognizant of it. try to control, try to challenge, try to change it, try to cherish those positive thoughts when you end up changing your negative thoughts, right? Try to really be present in your own inner dialogue so you can work towards silencing that inner critic. Stephanie says, change it, practice changing my thinking. Isn't that funny how it takes practice? You wouldn't think that it would be that hard, but it is so hard. Probably one of the hardest things we do as humans. Okay. So I'm going to leave you today. Perfect timing. I'm keeping my time. I'm checking my time here. So I'm going to leave you today with some skills and techniques. Okay. So practice mindfulness, change your story. Don't compare yourself to others. This is easier said than done. Channel that inner rock star. I don't know if any of you saw the Super Bowl commercial that was talking about don't call people a rock star, right? But I don't care. I'm going to call all of you rock stars. So channel your inner rock star. Move your body more. Moving your body more can really help your self-esteem. That's been my challenge for 2023 for myself is that I've been waking up at 5 a.m. and challenging myself to move my body because I find that when I would try to move my body, work out or go on a walk or whatever after work or on my lunch break, I was just so depleted from the day that it's like I didn't have anything left to give myself. You know what I mean? And I just like, I was really suffering. That's why I wanted to do this webinar. I was really suffering. My mental health was really suffering. My self-esteem, my self-confidence was really suffering. So I challenged myself to move my body. I've always liked to exercise. I've always liked to work out. I've always enjoyed it. But it always just felt like I didn't have enough time, or when I did have time, it was like the last thing I wanted to do, right? Or it was something was always would take precedence over it. Like I would have to finish a slide deck for a meeting the next day. I would have to work late. I would have something on fire. I would have a sporting event for one of my, like for my children or something like that. I don't have children, but I'm just trying to use examples that some of you might have. Or, you know, maybe you want to spend time with your spouse or your significant other because at the end of the day, like you're both home and that's the time that you have with each other throughout the day, right? You don't want to like it feels like we don't have enough time for ourselves. So what I challenged myself to do was I woke up early. Nobody's going to interrupt me. Nobody's working at 5 a.m. If you are, then stop. And challenge myself to wake up at 5 a.m. and move my body first thing in the morning, do something first for myself before I just give the rest of myself to everybody else all day, right? To my students, to my coworkers, to my boss, to our clients, to all of you, right? So I challenged myself to do that and it has significantly helped me. So I would encourage all of you to move your body more, or even just wake up early or just make the first thing that you do in the morning something for yourself. Whether that's exercising or whether that's, you know, reflecting, mindfulness, journaling. My mom actually, I challenged her to do it with me and she wakes up at the same time, but she's like, I'm not working out. That's not for me. So she just wakes up early, makes herself a cup of coffee and reads the newspaper because she doesn't feel like she has enough time to read the newspaper throughout the day or at the end of the day. She's too exhausted. She doesn't want to read the news. So she just reads the newspaper in the morning and just has some quiet time. Volunteer, practice forgiveness of others, and practice forgiveness of yourself. And then realize that you are not your circumstances. You are not your circumstances. What's happening to you right now in your life, whatever season of life that you're in, or what happened to you today, this morning, what happens to you tomorrow, what happened yesterday, what's happened this week, right? What's happening in the world. That's not who you are. right? So you are not your circumstances. So there's two links that I have here on the slide deck, and the slide deck will be available to you on the website in the follow-up email tomorrow. I'll get it up there as fast as I can. I didn't have a chance to before the session. There's a 3 self-compassion exercise pack that I linked for you that I thought was a great resource. And then also a worksheet, like an about me worksheet, that I think just kind of challenges you to do some self-reflection and helps you to identify some negative self-talk and how you can change that. So you can access both of those links on the slide deck. And then here are 15 self-reflection questions that you could ask yourself. So feel free to use this as well. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can definitely download the slide deck and utilize those questions for yourself. Maybe you want to do them in your next team meeting with your team, right? Or maybe do one of the worksheets or the exercise pack in your next team meeting. And then I have a self-esteem quiz for you. So you can take your own self-esteem quiz, and it will it's not to diagnose you with any psychological disorder. It's just for your own self-reflection. But if you score on the low end, it might mean you need to practice more self-love and self-compassion and have some more positive self-talk, right? And then if you answered almost never to some of these questions, there's 10 questions, you might already have a healthy self-esteem, so keep it going. And if you answered almost never to some of these questions, if you answer most of the time, you may need to take some additional steps to just boost your self-esteem, right? Last one is some take-home messages. So I'm going to leave you with some take-home messages, and then I'll have some time for questions, 11:10. My take-home message that I want to leave you all with today, and that's something that I really had to come to terms with myself, is that everyone suffers from low self-esteem every once in a while. Most people bounce back eventually. Each of us is born with infinite potential. You as a human being have infinite potential and equal worth because you are a human being. With a little self-compassion and some self-love and some positive self-talk, which we're all challenging ourselves to be better at today, there are no limits to what we can achieve. So take some time, be intentional about it to understand the tools that are out there and that can help you boost your self-esteem when you feel down. I've given you some tools and some tips today. Simply taking the time, being intentional. Maybe you do that in the morning. Maybe you challenge yourself to start waking up early, to just take some time to be intentional with your own inner dialogue. Simply taking the time to recognize these times can help you move forward and feel better. Okay. So here are all my references I used for this presentation. And then I'm going to put a quick plug in for all of you really quickly before we end the session. We have a Returning Citizens Workshop series that's coming up, and we've been getting a lot of influx of questions about it. The first workshop is on February 27th, so it's coming up, and it's going to be live in person in Bloomington Normal from 10 a.m. to noon. So you can register for that on our website. Our marketing's been going out for it. Some very specific marketing went out yesterday for it. If you're not on our email listserv for our marketing, please sign up. You can do that on our website on icsps@ilstu.edu. I'll put that in the chat here. Or you can email me and I will send you the link directly, icsps@ilstu.edu. That's the email that you can email. Oops, that's not our website. And then workshop 1, workshop 2, workshop 3, there's 6 workshops. You don't have to attend all the workshops. Okay. So we've had some people who have been emailing me and they are really upset that some of the workshops are going to be in person. There's 3 workshops in person. There's 3 that are virtual. Okay. The in-person ones, we potentially might be able to have a virtual component, but we're still, we're really encouraging people to attend in person. We're kind of approaching that hybrid model to these workshops. And two of the workshops that are in person. So the first one's in person in the next couple of weeks, implementing normal. And then the other two that are in person are right before and at the WeOA Summit. So if you are attending the WeOA Summit, or if you've registered, or if you haven't registered for it yet, definitely register for it. But if you haven't registered for the WeOA Summit yet, or if you have, sorry, the second workshop in this Returning Citizens workshop series, that's in person, is the day before the summit. So you could just come early to the summit. It's the same location, same hotel as the summit. Great, Lucas. I'm glad I'm answering your questions. And then the fifth or the third live session for this workshop series is at the summit. So it's going to be one of the breakout sessions at the summit. And we're hoping to have that one be live streamed. Christine, yes. So we're hoping to have that one at the summit be live streamed. We're still working out the kinks for that though, so don't hold me to that, but we're hoping that it will be. So that way, if you can't attend the summit live, then you will still have access to that. So these are the first three workshops, and then these are the next three. And this workshop series is being put on for free. All of them are free. Jeffrey Abramowitz he's a returning citizen himself, which I think really makes for a very impactful viewpoint to learn from. And he is so well renowned. So definitely make sure you're signing up for them. If you can only attend one, sign up for that one. You do not have to attend these consecutively to be able to be impacted by the professional development. Okay. So if you can only attend one, or if you can only attend the virtual ones, sign up for those ones, put those on your calendar, register for them. All of the registration links are separate, because even though this is a series, they don't necessarily build upon each other. Each one of them has their own lens and perspective that Jeffrey is going to be looking through and working with all of you on, all the attendees. So you don't have to attend them consecutively. And if you miss one of the virtual ones, it's going to be recorded for the virtual sessions for sure. And so, yeah, and then that is also on our website, and I will put that in the chat here momentarily. At the end of the workshop series is going to be an employer convening, and that's going to be in person on May 16th. We're still working on who or where that's going to be. So that location is going to be to be announced, but it's going to be local employers in hiring and retaining talent. And then all of the attendees from all of the workshops are going to obtain a comprehensive handbook of resources and tools to assist them in their work in hiring returning citizens. And then here's the reentry website. So if you want to sign up for any of the workshop series on the reentry returning citizens workshop series, if you want to sign up for any of the sessions, you can go to illinoisworkforceacademy.com, click on returning citizens. That's the direct URL on the PowerPoint slide here. You can also sign up for our WeOA Professional Development Committee marketing. That is linked here on this slide as well. You can also follow us. Please follow us. I run our social media with my coworker, Tanner. So please follow us on Facebook. We have a new LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, and we also have a Twitter. So please follow us, and you'll also get updates on this workshop series and all of our other professional development that we put on as well. So if you're on Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, please be following us. We would love for you to follow us and interact with us. And then now we'll break for questions. Oh, I don't have a slide that says questions, but we'll break for questions. We have a couple minutes here, about 13 minutes. So if you don't have any questions or comments, feel free to end a little early today. But if you do, feel free to type in the chat. I would gladly love to interact with you. So let me see here. Let me go back, because I know we had some personal stories that I wanted to touch on. So earlier, Ashley said a little personal, but being single and yesterday being a love holiday, yeah, with Valentine's Day and spending it alone made me be in an emotional mood. My kids are grown or have girlfriends, so that when this holiday rolled around, it rolled into me going off on one of my kids when he did get home. And this morning about his grades, I just spiraled, and now I feel horrible. The things I yelled about to my kid are things we could have just talked about, but because of my own personal awareness of being sad, I lashed out the wrong way. I think that is awesome that you're able to self-reflect that though, Ashley, and just move forward from it. And, maybe you can teach your kid some of the things you learned today. Sherry said that it was their situation when we were doing our self-reflection was it was a recent overwhelming situation and quite complicated. I did the right thing, but it was not accepted the right way. That's challenging, right? Because we can't determine how other people accept us, right? We can't control others. That's really hard to deal with as well. You have to stand strong in your beliefs based on facts. I felt defeated and asked for help. But you know what? You asked for help. So I want to applaud you for asking for help. Cherish it, right? Cherish that you asked for help, that you knew you needed to, because not everybody can do that and not everybody's willing to do that. So props to you, Sherry. Okay. Let me go back down here. Maureen says, it is good to have that reminder that we are not our circumstances personally because we are in the business of helping people whose circumstances have led them to have to ask for our help. Yes, I think that is one of the biggest things that factors our self-esteem in our line of work, working for the state or working for LWIA, being a frontline staff member, working with students. I think that we tend to take on others' circumstances, like our clients and our students' circumstances, and that affects our self-esteem and our self-concept. And so it's good to remind ourselves that we're not our circumstances, and we're not others' circumstances either. And to remind our students, remind our clients that they aren't their circumstances either. Sherry, Stephanie says this is a great session. Thank you. You're welcome, Stephanie. I appreciate that positive reinforcement. Sherry, best presentation ever. I will be using personally, sharing with coworkers, friends, and family. Awesome. Thank you so much. Lucas says good times. Thanks. Amy, great presentation. Feeling positive today. Awesome. I'm so happy I could add to your positivity today. Maureen says, thank you for your authenticity. Thanks for the great webinar. Awesome. Awesome. Love, so glad I attended this today. Oh, I'm so glad that you attended it today. To Kathy. Lucas, thanks for the background on the workshop series. Yes, there's been some confusion on that, so I wanted to clarify that today. Donna, which was the session you suggest as a must attend for the returning citizens workshop series? I don't know for sure which one I would recommend attending the most. I think that the way we have them built out is that we wanted them to be where no matter if you only attend one workshop or all 6 of them, you're still gonna leave with something to take back in terms of hiring returning citizens or being able to view returning citizens in a different light. And so that's how we've developed these sessions with Jeffrey. So I think any of them that you can attend, because they are spread out between February and June. And like I said, if you can only attend one, then make sure you attend that one because you're still going to get something out of it. I don't know if any of you attended the Human-Centered Design workshop series that we had last summer, but you had to attend all of those consecutively, and it was kind of a challenge. So we try to approach this a little bit differently because we realize, especially as we get into the spring and summer, everybody has kids, activities, and vacation days and spring break and things that take you out of the office. And so we wanted you to still be encouraged to attend this series, even if you could only attend one. Thank you, Kirsten. Great webinar. Enjoyed this very much. Very helpful. You are welcome, Sandy. Thank you for coming. Thanks for Derice or Derice. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. Thanks very much. You are a very skilled and engaging facilitator. I enjoyed this and have some wonderful takeaways. Awesome. I'm so happy that you feel that way. Sherry, do you do shorter presentations? I would like to have you speak to HS staff from Central Illinois counties. Sherry, I'm sure we could work something out. Why don't you email me? And I will talk to my director and we'll see what we can do. Lucas, sad is Single Awareness Day is today. Hope springs eternal. Yes. I love that, Lucas. Single Awareness Day is today. I didn't know that is a national holiday. Christine, great workshop. Thank you, Kirsten. Awesome. Great. I'm so happy that all of you enjoyed today's session. I really hope it gave you some intentional time blocked out on your calendar to self-reflect, learn something new. And maybe you kind of already knew a lot of this information, but you just don't really practice it, right? So let this webinar be your reminder to practice that positive self-talk, be more aware of it. Mark says, perhaps you could suggest listening and watching the recording featuring Jeffrey Abramowitz. Yes, Mark, thank you so much for that reminder. Mark, do you want to work for ICSPS? No, I'm just kidding. But Mark Lohman, thank you. So they said that if you did not get a chance to watch the orientation session, I was not on that, so I apologize. I haven't even watched it yet. I need to watch it. My colleague Molly was on it. If you haven't had a chance to watch the orientation session about the Returning Citizens workshop series with Jeffrey, he did do last week's workshop or Workforce Wednesday webinar. He did that last week. And he did the orientation session. He kind of went into a little bit about what each session is going to be. So that might help you if you watch that recording, help you determine what session you want to sign up for sure, or you definitely want to make sure you attend. Great suggestion, Mark. Thank you. And that recording of the orientation session is on the website, the Returning Citizens Workshop website, which is illinoisworkforceacademy.com/returning citizens. If you just go to our illinoisworkforceacademy.com website and click on Returning Citizens at the top menu, it's that page. Great plug in for that. Thank you, Mark. Okay. We have 5 minutes left, so I'm happy to stay on if anybody wants to talk anymore. But that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much to everyone who has joined us. I'm going to go ahead and put the follow-up survey. I just put that in the chat. So that's the follow-up survey from today's session. Please take it. I would love your feedback. And we really do look at those. I'm the one who looks at them and compiles them for the Professional Development Committee. So I'm a part of the WEO Professional Development Committee with my director, Amy Julian, and we do compile all of your suggestions for future Workforce Wednesday webinars. We look at all the feedback from the sessions, from the presenters that we bring in, and we determine if we want to bring them back or if you all liked the session or if you did not like the session. And that just helps us plan future professional development so that we can make sure we're always learning with you and engaging with you and just helping you serve yourself and serve your clients and your students and your coworkers the best that you can. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate your attendance today and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the weather. I hope it's nice where you're at. It's been nice a couple days here and there. We'll see if that lasts, right? But thank you so much. Have a great day. And we'll see you next Wednesday. And hopefully you sign up for our reentry workshop series.